Ever notice how some jobs, like, you see them every day and they seem pretty simple, but then you start, like, really thinking about it and you
Mm.
realize how much more is going on under the surface.
Absolutely. The assumptions we make about professions, without truly understanding the intricacies of the work involved is fascinating.
Right, like crossing guards, for example. With this deep dive today, we're using insights from RoleCatcher, and honestly, it's given me a whole new perspective on them.
That's a vital community role, that's for sure.
I mean, at first glance, you think, okay, stop traffic, help people cross.
Yeah.
Simple, right?
Seems pretty straightforward.
But then you dig into it, like in the RoleCatcher's career guide, and you realize just how much responsibility they actually have.
It's way more involved than just holding up a stop sign.
Way more. Monitoring the traffic flow, helping anyone who might need a hand, like people with disabilities, even keeping an eye out for like safety concerns and reporting them.
Right. And think about how much our traffic environments have changed, even in the last few years. Distracted drivers everywhere you look, cyclists navigating these congested streets, even just the sheer size of some vehicles now, and how that limits visibility.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is. And the guide even mentioned, having to handle aggressive drivers, which honestly I'd never really considered before.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that takes some serious, like, conflict resolution skills.
It's something that's easy to overlook, but having that high emotional intelligence is really important in this role.
Yeah.
You're not just interacting with vehicles, right? You're managing people.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You've got pedestrians, all with their own expectations. And then, of course, you got the kids who don't always, shall we say, grasp the dangers involved.
Right, kids and their, shall we say, enthusiasm for traffic regulations. It's not always a perfect match.
Exactly. And actually, RoleCatcher cites some data indicating that a significant number of near-miss accidents near schools are because of children and their sometimes unpredictable movements.
So it's more than just, like, patience.
Right. It's about creating a safe environment for everyone while managing all of these different factors. That takes a specialized skill set.
It really does make you think differently about those times you're stuck at a school crosswalk waiting for everyone to cross.
It's easy to get impatient.
The level of responsibility they're carrying is kind of incredible. And here's something else I found really interesting, something I never would have expected at RoleCatcher. They emphasize how even crossing guard applications are being reviewed by AI now.
It really shows how technology is changing everything about how we work.
So how does a crossing guard, someone we don't usually associate with, algorithms and all that, how do they handle that?
Adapting is essential, learning these new skills.
What does that even look like, though?
Well, RoleCatcher's analysis actually shows that candidates who tailor their applications, their resumes, all that, to match the keywords and skills in the job description, they're more likely to get past those screening algorithms.
So you need more than just experience. You have to know how to, like, translate that experience for the computers, too.
Exactly. And it highlights how important those digital skills are becoming, no matter what you do.
So we've got this job that's all about keeping people safe, but you need to be tech savvy, too, just to even get your foot in the door.
It's a real shift in how we think about work.
Wild. So if it's more than just, a strong voice and that bright vest, what are some of the other skills that make a great crossing guard, the less obvious ones?
RoleCatcher's career guide actually goes into this, and it's really fascinating. Of course, you have to be aware of traffic, you have to communicate clearly, and you have to stay calm in a stressful situation.
Makes sense.
But then they have things like patience, empathy, even some basic first aid, and it made me realize,
Hold on, first aid for scraped knees.
well, that too, I'm sure. But think about it. In a lot of cases, a crossing guard might be the first person on the scene if a child gets hurt walking to school or if someone has a medical issue.
Oh, right, yeah.
Having that knowledge, even if it's just basic, knowing how to assess the situation and give some initial care, that can make a huge difference.
That's incredible. I never would have thought about the first aid aspect of it.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? All these roles that we kind of take for granted.
Yeah, like they're so important to how our communities work, but we don't always see all the details.
Absolutely. And, there's all this talk about AI and automation
Right.
taking over jobs, changing everything.
Right, which is kind of freaky, honestly.
It is, but then you have these professions like crossing guards, where it's those human qualities that really matter. You can't program empathy into a robot.
That's true. You need someone who can actually understand what's going on, read the situation.
Exactly. And that reminds me, remember we were talking about those AI recruiters? RoleCatcher actually talks about how those algorithms work, how they choose who to interview.
Oh, yeah, it's all about the data, right?
It is. They're looking for patterns. They're making predictions.
So, like, If my resume just said crossing guard a bunch of times, that wouldn't be very impressive to the AI.
Well, it's not just about listing the job title. You have to think about it like this. You need to translate your experience into something those algorithms can understand.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Think about the skills you used. Instead of just saying crossing guard, say something like manage traffic flow during peak hours or de-escalated conflicts with, drivers who weren't paying attention.
Oh, I see. So you're really spelling it out, like what you actually did.
Exactly. Quantify it. Demonstrate how you made a difference, even if it seems small.
Because even something as simple as getting a kid safely across the street, that matters, right?
It does. It all adds up, and it shows that you understand what the job is really about.
So even though being a crossing guard is about connecting with people, you still got to know how to talk to the computers, too.
It's a new world out there, that's for sure.
It really is. So we've talked about all these skills, but what about the really experienced crossing guards, the ones who've been doing it forever?
Pros.
Yeah, exactly. Is there a whole career path for crossing guards?
There is, actually. RoleCatcher's career guide talks about that, too.
No way. Tell me more.
Well, you have your entry-level positions, right?
Right, where you're just learning everything.
Exactly. You're figuring out the timing, how to communicate effectively, all the basics.
And then what? You move up to junior crossing guard?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a busier intersection or you start training new crossing guards. You might even have to deal with those crazy school drop-off and pickup times.
Oh, man, those are the worst. Parents in a rush. Kids everywhere.
Exactly. But that's how you gain experience, how you show that you can handle more responsibility.
Okay, so that's junior level, but what about the top of the food chain? What does it take to become the ultimate crossing guard?
Well, you could become a lead crossing guard, which is a whole other level.
Lead crossing guard, that sounds intense. What do they do?
It's a lot of management, making sure everyone is doing their job, that they're trained properly.
So less about actually holding the stop sign and more about directing everyone else.
Exactly. You're working with the school, with the city, maybe even creating plans for emergencies.
Wow, I never would have imagined. They should get a special uniform or something, a whistle, maybe a walkie-talkie.
Maybe. But seriously, they have a lot on their plate. Think about it. If there's a sudden storm, who decides if it's safe for kids to cross?
Oh, right, the lead crossing guard.
Exactly. They have to think fast, make decisions that could affect a lot of people.
It's a big responsibility.
It is, and it shows how much experience they have, how much they've learned over the years.
It really makes you see them differently, That's not just about directing traffic, it's about protecting the community.
Exactly, and it makes you realize that every interaction matters. That little smile, that quick hello, it all adds up.
It's about building a sense of, trust, right? That we're all in this together.
Exactly, and it's something we could all use a little more of these days.
So before the break, we were talking about how technology is changing things, even for crossing guards.
It's really making us rethink how we view certain jobs.
Exactly, and it got me thinking, with all this AI and automation, could we ever get to a point where, a robot is in charge of the crosswalk?
It's an interesting question. I mean, AI is great at processing tons of information, finding patterns, making predictions.
Right, way better than humans.
Exactly. So you can imagine a system that's constantly watching traffic, right? And it's using all this data to, predict problems before they even happen, maybe even changing traffic lights to keep pedestrians safe.
So instead of a crossing guard, we have a robot brain controlling everything?
In a way, yeah. And there are definitely some advantages there. Less room for human error, faster reaction times.
Sure, but can AI really, understand what's happening on that human level?
That's the big question, isn't it? Because a crossing guard, they're not just reacting to cars and signals. They're picking up on all these little details.
Like what?
A kid who's about to run across the street without looking, a driver who's distracted, even just body language, someone who might need help.
It's like they have a sixth sense, they can tell when something's about to go wrong.
Exactly. And that kind of intuition, that ability to read a situation, that's not something we can easily program into a machine, at least not yet.
And don't forget about the human connection part, that friendly face, that little wave that makes people feel safe.
Absolutely. Those small interactions, they build a sense of community.
And a robot can't really do that, can it?
Not in the same way, no. So even though technology is changing things, there's still a need for that human element, that empathy, that understanding.
It's yeah, technology can help, but it can't replace everything.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing to remember, especially as we rely more and more on technology in our lives.
So what have we learned today? We've learned that crossing guards, they're not just, holding up signs. They're keeping people safe. They're part of the community, and they're using, like, way more skills than we realize.
It's about looking beyond the surface,
Right.
at all the complexity that goes into these jobs we might not always think about.
Totally. So next time you see a crossing guard, give them a nod, say thanks. They're doing a lot more than you might realize.
Absolutely. They're the unsung heroes of our streets, keeping our communities safe, one crosswalk at a time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone, and we'll see you next time.